Our story's about a famous fighter who, during a match with his rival, accidentally kills him. Sadly, he ends up in jail and gets sentenced to 9 years. But since he behaved well inside, he gets parole, so he'll spend some time under supervision instead of locked up. Then a new problem comes up that changes everything. He fights again. The big question is, will he turn his life around, or will life push him back into the ring? Let's see what happens to him. The film starts in a prison where a guard calls out to John, our main guy, who's just gotten parole because he was on his best behavior. John walks over to the guard in charge, someone who knows him well. Problems are destined to be on the street. And since John doesn't want problems, nothing was waiting for him after he finished John's job in real estate. He decided to go relax for a while and drink at a nearby bar, where he saw the bartender serving drinks to a group of rowdy young men. 2 of them confronted her, but she managed to rebuff them and influence them. John was watching the situation from afar and didn't want to intervene, but the bar owner also wanted to stop them, but couldn't. The bartender continued her work, but unfortunately, the situation escalated with the rowdy young men, who no one stood up for, and a fight broke out between them. At this point, John lost his patience and start fight, and the owner of the bar for himself, but that's what's required, and he asked John to work for him as a night guard to protect them from those thugs, and this is considered legal work. So he agreed, of course, and then he had 2 jobs instead. One day in the morning, John went to his real estate job, and he was tired as usual, and he claimed he wouldn't come back. But John came back, and even though he was paid less than his colleagues, John didn't object afterward, and he finished his job and went to the name to be monitored, and he spoke to the officer in charge of his last task, and that he found a job, and he himself was telling her about his life seriously, except the officer wasn't actually with him, and this annoyed John, who was controlling his nerves, and the guard said to him, "Okay, forget about it. Next week, at night, when it's time for his job at the bar." It was a nice weather until 2 of them drank a lot, and then they fought, and John separated them. But the moment he turned his back, they started fighting again, and then one of them started hitting them, and he went back outside and said to them, "If you want to fight, keep it outside." And the strange thing is, they heard him and went back to fight again, who was actually following what was happening. John helped her yesterday, and her name is Reno, who asked her about her opinion on John and if it would help their job. And she said, of course, if this isn't helpful, who helps Reno get a card from John, who told him if he wants a real job, come to this address. But John gave a clear reply and threw the card at him, saying he's done working with them. Let's continue. After John finishes his job in real estate, he'll be surprised by Veronica, his ex-girlfriend, who was waiting outside. They'll sit in a cafe, and you'll realize she's not coming to scold or talk about what he did, and you'll know she's the reason he left early. He didn't leave out of love or anything, just his daughter wants a surgery. She has money for the surgery with her, and when she found out he was wronged and wants to compensate them, she let him out and wants him. He works for his daughter's surgery, and of course John doesn't have any money except his current job, and he knows this. So he gets angry and says to him that she thought he was sincere when he said he was wronged and left. But John actually felt guilty and started gathering the money he's receiving. At night, he finds him very worried and asks him what's wrong. She knows he has some problems and asks him if he knows the person who offered him the job. She says yes, and they take the place. Reno, who was gambling, and they get to know each other. And they ask John about the type of job. He says he'll take you on it, and they take the job of illegal fighting. Of course, John refuses. And they ask Reno if he's scared. He says of course not, and they confess to Reno that he knows about the release, but his mind is set on fighting, and the condition can't reach him here. Also, the gain is huge, but he refuses, and walks away the next day, visiting Veronica at her house to apologize for not being able to help her with her work problem, which bothers her more, and she throws out the messages he used to send her, saying he wants to compensate her and help her. She calls him a bastard and scolds her daughter on the shower's voice, asking her mother who that is, and she realizes it's a former friend of her father who feels sorry for the child and decides to gather money by any means. Reno goes with Vera to the store, where her owner is named Dolly, and asks him to bet on her fighter tonight, who will surely win. But Dolly refuses, and they realize it's because of him that they lost a lot. The bets and stakes wasted his money, and he won't lose this store from him either, especially since no one wants to buy it in the first place. Reno helps him this time because he's in debt due to gambling, but he refuses but offers to buy the old tools from him, which are worth a lot. But Reno hates them very much and refused to sell them even when he was broke. He leaves the store, but Dolly said to him, if you change your mind, I'm ready to buy them. The next day at work, Solly argues with him because he didn't do the job he asked for, but Solly was never interested in it in the first place, and because of the pressure on himself, Solly falls into a trap. My heart races and I make a CPR for him until the ambulance arrives with a heart rhythm organizer, and the nurse thanks him for his quick action and says that the man owes his life to him. But the nurse doesn't know that Suleiman had already sent John away before he fainted. What happened will make John go to Reno at night, but he was busy fighting and focused with his fighter. Every time John goes to talk to him and walks away from the other side, he asks him, and John prefers to watch silently until the fight stops. But the fighters get injured in his nose, which makes him distracted, so he takes Reno to suture the wound and realizes that he is in front of him. 5 minutes later, when he returns to the hospital, Reno tells him that he is almost done and will definitely come back. He comes to John, who asks him to talk to him, but he says he's not free and talks to the fighter who comes back to stand second. He says, "Reno, now you have your revenge." But the fighter falls to the ground, lies down, and says, "Hey, what's up?" And the free one talks to him and says, "Yeah," and he's annoyed, knowing that he's fighting, but the number of matches doesn't count, meaning he doesn't rely on it because he needs to gather a certain amount of money, and then he will be defeated. He says, "Reno, I agree, but if there's something else, the important thing is that we take him to the hospital and embarrass Reno that he should withdraw, meaning if he dies in the ring, a normal person dies, but he just withdraws, not entering afterward." Reno enters the ring, but the referee objects because he's not a fighter. But Reno insists that his reputation is higher than the first one, but he walks out in the ring, knowing the referee and the rules, and says, "Never fight," leaving them both in the ring. But John was afraid of the fighter he was talking to, although the second fighter wanted them to use a normal weapon, which is allowed in the ring. The referee said to John, "If you want to use a normal weapon," of course, he refused, and the fight began between the two. The fighter was violent, and John was calm at first until he knew his opponent's weak points, which were in the knees and chest. He hit him once in the chest cage, breaking it, his ribs, and he fell afterward, dazed, and won the decisive blow and was nicknamed Bonebreaker. Reno was naturally happy, finally a strong fighter to complete the match with him. After the match, he goes to his restroom, and they take Reno's share of the fight, but he gives it to the first fighter because he played half the match. This annoys Reno, who wanted the whole amount for John because he wants to gather all the profits to enter a big match the next day. John goes to his weekly weigh-in. As usual, the referee isn't paying attention to him, nor does he even look at him, even after John said he would fight his match and hit people for money. It appears that John wants to talk to him, but the referee isn't here. He tells him to go and do John's exercises afterwards to maintain his fitness. But when he comes back to his apartment, he's surprised to find Reno there. He says he needs to get locks for his house because John got robbed of money and goes to check on him. But he knows Reno knows where she is because he was hiding her in the air conditioner. Reno told him that this is the first place the criminal will look, and he also finds Vera, with him and Jayan taking him along. Reno knows there's a big bet fight, and they want a large amount of money, so they have to play small matches until they gather the required amount. They want him to join them, and he agrees to continue with them. Reno finds out they need to meet someone named Dakan, because he's the one who will enter the match, and they will go to Dakan, who will be an old man, but he won't agree to enter them in the bet. Although John won in the last match fairly, he refuses to ask John to talk to Dakan alone and leave them together. Dakan tells John that he knows what you'll say, but it won't be useful to risk hearing from someone who is still starting and no one knows anything about him, especially that you are very deep in the hole and you don't want anything to understand. John understands that Dakan won't help him because he's afraid of losing, and he's on the way back with Vera and Reno, who is stubborn because Dakan refused to bet. But Vera tells him that he maintains his reputation and dignity. Reno says to them that the problem is with John because he is gentle, and that makes everyone lose from him. And he asks John to lighten up a bit and show that he is angry because the audience loves this type, and it will bring Ronnie to an international place for the second time. Maybe he will agree to bet, but he refuses, and Reno doesn't find a solution in front of him except to sell the guns, and his father will pay them $5,000. But Reno wants more, but he takes them forcefully. But he advises Dory not to sell the guns because they will bring them back the second time, and it will make Reno with more things he likes. So the big match will come out after that, and they will be in an old place for ships, and it will be, there are fierce dogs in the match, and whoever falls will be angry. John will be anxious, he and Vera, especially since the dogs made him, and whoever comes under their teeth will not let him. But Reno reassures him and goes to talk to the night manager, and when he leaves with Vera, he asks her what makes her stay with Reno. She says to him that it is an old religion and that he saved her life. From then on, she was with him. Or Reno goes to talk to Tis to enter the match. But Tis tells him if he brings the money he owes him, he says no, and that he came to play. Tis bet his men to tie him, but John chases him and realizes that he owes Tis a large amount. John proposes to Tis that he play on the amount. If he wins, Denny stays. If he loses, he throws Denny to the dogs. You agree, T? And they start fighting between the two. T's fighter will be superior in the first, especially since he came just for Denny to encourage John. John tells him, "Consider him a potato sack, you old man. This guy is all fat." But John falls and chokes the second fighter, and the dogs bite him too. But he can hit him and break free, knock him to the ground, and win. John wins the decisive blow, saving Denny from death. And Denny, of course, is overjoyed and thanks him for what he did for him. But then John gets a call from Veronica and goes to the hospital because Sarah got tired suddenly. He reassures her that he's almost ready to gather the money and is almost there. He'll have the operation. As for Denny, he's in his apartment with Vera, who tells him not to take advantage of John because he's not like the fighters before him. Denny asks her if he loves her, but she doesn't answer and gets nervous. Denny says to her, "You're a fighter. Trust him, and know that he went to jail because he killed a man with his hands." He asks her to stand by his side until his debt is paid. But unfortunately, John calls him a coward, but he doesn't speak because John is very vengeful for what he did and wouldn't have fought them unless he was thinking about what happened. Denny tries to fix what happened and talk to John, but he refuses to open the topic again. After that, John enters more fights and wins them all, gathering everything $70,000 for when they come back to collect the money, and it still needed $100,000 to complete it. And then a call comes to Rennie, and he responds and leaves Vera with Juno, and she feels sorry for what Rennie said, but Juno knows she's changed in prison, and he doesn't get angry. Even if people shout loudly, it doesn't affect him, because prisoners used to have loud voices, and they got used to it over time, and they didn't make a difference with him. We know that this call to Rennie about fighting with Harry will be the one who doesn't like to fight at night. Vera will be sitting and planning her revenge, and she tells her Jewel when she sees her. Then she wasn't working in the hospital for whom? She will say she tried. You couldn't see the people dying in front of her, but Rennie was playing like usual. But God knows the guy from Falu. He owes him, and he preferred to hit him, and said to him, with him for a week, to cover what he owes him, and what will die the next day. Rennie will take Juno for a new fight, and Vera will be worried, because the fighter she's talking about is really strong, and the fight starts, and Juno, as usual, hits first, but the fight is locked on his hand because the place is always chaotic, and he needs help to kill the fighters. The important thing is that Jum will hit the fighter in the face and break it, and then he will be calm and logic will come out, and then they will celebrate by their gain. But they are fixed to get a call from Veronica, who is from him. He takes Vera and Reno and goes to her. He enters the apartment and finds an answer from the hospital that refused to plant the heart for her daughter. After paying, he enters and finds her in the bathroom and drowns her in blood because she tried to commit suicide. He takes her to the hospital quickly and sits waiting for her with Vera and tells her about what he's doing with Veronica and that he's helping her, and tells her about Reno to tell him that it's not just to ask him what shocks him because he's in trouble. Then he enters Veronica and scolds her for what she did, and that it's not because the hospital refused to commit suicide, and that you need to fight for your daughter. But Veronica wanted to die and donate her heart to her daughter because they are compatible. John tells her to wait and the money will be ready. The next day, Reno goes to Dolly to calm the nerves, but he's shocked to find out he sold them, and he leaves from there angry, but he accepts a new match to gather the money. As usual, John goes to the observation, and the condition doesn't care about it. At night, John goes to fight and is with a strong and dangerous person. He starts fighting, and the Diener needs money from Reno, but John can win against his opponent, but they ask him to kill him, and he naturally refuses to lose the match and considers it a loss, and Reno loses the money. Vera tries to techno returns, otherwise Reno hits him, but John refuses to kill him again, even if another person dies. The main thing is that he shouldn't be the one who killed this time either. They hear Reno talking to himself and realize that Dean hit him because he lost. They find him badly injured and help him up. He tells them to leave him alone in the car. John asks Reno how much he owes the man, and they find out it's $15,000, which surprises John. He asks what they'll spend it on, but Vera intervenes and tells him that Reno is protecting her and that the debt actually belongs to her. John has an ordinary day and goes to visit Sarah, training for the upcoming match. On the day it happens, he's at a cafe, and BG has a debt and takes it with him to meet the head of Val. He goes to meet him and finds him with the owner of the company he used to work for, but Solomon's brother says he owes him and makes him pay it. He tells him that Solomon is his son-in-law, but he doesn't like him. But his daughter loves him, and he compromises for his daughter Val, who is the same person Reno owes. He asks John what he needs from him to pay off his debt, so they know there's a daughter who needs a heart transplant, and it has to be done quickly. Reno's debt also needs to be reduced, otherwise he'll die. But Val says to him, just one request, choose something from them, and John chooses to bet on him in the fight. Even if he won, he would have taken the girl, but John remembered that if he had won, he would have taken Sarah, and also Reno could pay off the debt. Then John would return to Veronica's house, and she would thank him for standing by her side and tell him that she knew he was defending himself against her husband and killing him out of anger. But she was obsessed with him and couldn't have anything other than her daughter, and she was also afraid of losing her, so she was violent with him and wanted him to help her, and she knew he would do more than he could for Sarah to carry out the operation. John was happy with her words and decided to forgive himself for what he had done and start a new life. He then went to Lacan to convince him to bet, but he was drunk and not focused on the conversation. The next day, he went for observation, and this time he was obsessed with the condition and said to him to look at him and continued his speech, looking at the condition for the first time, and felt that he was finally interested in him. He returned to Reno's house and took his shoes off to walk because he decided not to fight anymore. Reno thanked him for what he had done and that he had saved him from death, and said that he was now his best friend and that he didn't have any friends at all. Indeed, he learned the meaning of friendship from him and asked him if he was ready for the upcoming fight for Sarah and for Fira. John agreed to continue with him when he felt from Reno that he was not just collecting money. Finally, Fira opened her heart to John and told him the reason for her debt to Reno, so they would know she was a champion in origin, and Reno decided to buy her to save her from her suffering and took her, paying Fievel until today. Yet despite that he never touched her even once, John says to her that Reno surely loves her, and they are not sure of each other, so she must follow him the next day. Reno goes to the final fight after finding someone betting on him, but it turns out it's Dakan who bet on him because he thinks he's a good person, and enters the fight, and the opponent will be extremely strong and break the network that challenges them, and the wrestler falls on John's drainpipe and falls into the pool. Everyone thinks he's dead, and Reno gets choked, and everyone goes to see him, but he comes out from under the pipes, and they continue the match, and he wins. John on the wrestler and the money too, and they solve their problems. Sarah does the operation finally, and Veronica rests from her daughter's side and thanks John because otherwise she would lose her. John surprises Reno that he's back to his father's wheelchair and gives her a gift to him, and she's very happy and decides that he and Fievel will marry each other. But John decides to continue in wrestling, but legally. And here we finish our movie. Subscribe for more, and like button will help me continue.